It was the year 2243, and humanity had finally reached the stars. Years of exploration, innovation, and discovery had brought humanity to distant planets and new galaxies. Humans had settled on a dozen different worlds, each different from the last, yet there was still so much to learn. But one discovery was about to change everything: the Thrillians. The Thrillians were unlike any species humanity had ever encountered. They were a highly advanced race, with a genetic engineering mastery that made them seem almost godlike in comparison. With skin that shimmered in shades of blue and eyes that glowed with intelligence, the Thrillians were not just different, they were otherworldly. They had built cities on planets that no human had even dreamed of reaching. And now, they were ready to meet humanity, though it was unclear whether that meeting would lead to peace or war. Evan Trevors was no stranger to high-stakes situations. A seasoned commander of the Starbound Exploration Corps, he had seen his fair share of strange and dangerous encounters. But standing in the massive meeting room aboard the research station orbiting Delmara X9, he couldn't help but feel a mix of awe and tension. Today was the first diplomatic meeting between humanity and the Thrillians, and it had to go perfectly. The fate of future interactions with this advanced species rested on Evan's shoulders. As the doors to the conference room opened, Evan entered with his team. The room was unlike any other he had seen. The walls were covered in an iridescent material that seemed to change color depending on the angle, giving the room an ethereal glow. At the center of the room, standing tall and regal, was Kaera, the Thrillian diplomat chosen to represent her people. Her skin shimmered with the faintest blue glow, and her eyes, a vibrant shade of gold, studied Evan with an intense gaze. Kaera was beautiful, but it wasn't just her appearance that caught Evan's attention. It was the way she carried herself like someone who had mastered every aspect of her life, someone who didn't need anyone or anything. She was the embodiment of confidence, and it was clear from the moment their eyes met that she didn't think much of humanity. Evan was used to being underestimated, but that didn't bother him. He had learned long ago that sometimes the best way to win respect was to be yourself, no matter what others expected. With that in mind, he smiled, offering her a friendly greeting. "Ambassador Kaera, it's an honor to meet you," Evan said, his voice steady and confident. Kaera's expression remained impassive. She didn't smile back, but she did nod. "Commander Trevors, I've been briefed on your species. I must say, I'm curious about how you've managed to survive as long as you have," she replied, her voice cold, yet not unkind. Evan raised an eyebrow, not offended but intrigued by her bluntness. "We're survivors. That's what we do," he said. "And we don't stop. Ever." Kaera didn't respond immediately. Instead, she studied him for a long moment, her golden eyes narrowing slightly. There was something almost calculating in the way she looked at him, as if trying to decipher a puzzle that didn't make sense. For a few seconds, the air between them felt thick with tension. The rest of Evan's team stood off to the side, watching the interaction quietly. But it was clear that Kaera wasn't just evaluating the humans in the room. She was studying Evan, the one who had been chosen to represent humanity in this historic moment. "I have been told that humans are unpredictable," Kaera finally said, her voice laced with both curiosity and caution. "That's an understatement." Evan couldn't help but chuckle. "You could say that. We don't fit into neat boxes." Kaera's lips pressed together in a thin line, and for a brief moment, something flickered in her eyes. Was it amusement? Frustration? It was hard to tell, but one thing was certain. Kaera didn't like being challenged, and Evan had just done that. The tension in the room grew thicker, and Evan could sense the growing unease among his team. The Thrillians weren't known for their friendliness, and even though Kaera's tone remained polite, there was an undercurrent of something else. Then, unexpectedly, she spoke again. "I've heard you humans have a habit of ignoring boundaries, of stepping into places you're not invited," Kaera said, her voice now hardening. Perhaps this conversation is one of those boundaries. Do not cross it. Evan's gaze flickered. He didn't show it, but her words struck a nerve. Humans didn't back down from challenges. Not when it came to survival. Not when it came to fighting for what they believed in. It was one of humanity's defining traits. Don't worry. I'll stay in my lane, he said, though his words were laced with an underlying challenge. Kyera's eyes flashed, and for a brief moment, Evan thought he saw a hint of something almost human in her expression. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by that same cool, unreadable mask. Good, she said. But remember this, Commander. I warned you. Evan smiled again. He couldn't help it. There was something about Kyera's fierce pride, her unshakable confidence, that made him respect her even more. I'll take your warning into account, he said, a small smile tugging at the corner of his lips. But I'm afraid I don't scare that easily. Kyera's expression tightened, but she said nothing more. The tension in the room was palpable, and everyone in the room could feel it. It was clear that this wasn't just a diplomatic meeting, it was a battle of wills. Despite her cold demeanor, despite the barriers she put up, Evan felt an undeniable pull toward her. There was something intriguing about Kyera. Something that went beyond her alien beauty or her mastery over her emotions. It was the challenge she represented. The way she viewed humanity as a puzzle to be solved. But that didn't mean he was going to back down. Far from it. I'm not here to fight you, Evan said, his voice steady and calm. I'm here to learn. Just like you are. And maybe, just maybe, we can help each other. Kyera's eyes narrowed again, this time with a hint of skepticism. We will see. Time will tell whether your species is worth the trouble. The meeting continued, but the rest of it passed in a blur for Evan. He could feel Kyera's eyes on him, even when she wasn't looking directly at him. There was something about the way she spoke, the way she held herself, that kept him on edge. She was calculating, intelligent, and everything about her screamed power. But Evan wasn't worried. He knew one thing for sure. Humans didn't back down, and they didn't lose. Days passed since the first meeting between Commander Evan Trevors and Ambassador Kyera. The diplomatic talks between humanity and the Thrillians were more tense than anyone had anticipated. The humans had been doing their best to keep the peace. But Kyera's icy demeanor, her refusal to engage openly, only made things harder. To the Thrillians, humans were unpredictable, emotional creatures, and Kyera was determined to understand them on her terms. Evan could feel the weight of the situation growing heavier with each passing day. The Thrillians were advanced, yes, but their cold precision had limits. They couldn't understand the spontaneity of humans. They didn't grasp how. Despite everything, humans never stopped pushing forward, never stopped adapting. The Thrillians preferred order, control, and precision, everything the human spirit wasn't. It wasn't long before the next diplomatic meeting arrived. This one was supposed to be a key moment, where the two species would discuss not just the terms of peace, but the potential for an alliance. The future of humanity's relationship with the Thrillians depended on this moment. As Evan walked into the large conference room on the Thrillian research station, he could already feel the tension in the air. Kyera was waiting at the center of the room, standing tall as always, her glowing blue skin catching the light in a way that made her seem almost otherworldly. Her golden eyes tracked Evan's every move, watching him like a hawk. But today, she seemed different, more guarded, more distant than the first time they had met. Evan took a deep breath. He had come to respect Kyera, despite her cold attitude. There was something in her, a strength, a brilliance that fascinated him. But it was also clear that she wasn't going to make this easy. He had to find a way through her defenses if they were going to have a chance at building any kind of lasting relationship with the Thrillians. Commander Trevors, Kyera greeted, her voice as composed as ever. I trust your journey was comfortable? Evan nodded. As comfortable as a trip to a foreign star can be. But let's get to the point, Kyra. We've got a lot to discuss. Kyra's eyes flickered, but her face remained neutral. Indeed. The matters at hand are of great importance. I've reviewed the proposals your people have suggested. However, I find myself unconvinced. Evan felt a surge of frustration, but he kept it in check. He had been expecting this. The Thrillians weren't going to accept human ideas easily, they never did. But what frustrated him most was Kyra's coldness. It was like she refused to see humanity as anything more than a curious experiment. I know we don't have much in common, Evan began, his voice calm but firm. But we can't just stand on opposite sides forever. You're trying to understand us, and we're trying to understand you. That's the first step toward peace. Kyra's lips curled into a small, almost imperceptible smile. I don't believe I need to understand you, Commander. I believe your species has already shown us everything we need to know. Evan felt the sting of her words, but he didn't show it. Instead, he leaned forward slightly, his gaze steady. Then what is it you're afraid of? He asked, his voice quiet but piercing. Kyra's smile faltered, and for the first time, there was a flicker of something in her eyes, a shadow of emotion that she quickly masked. Fear is a human trait, she said. Evan raised an eyebrow, challenging her. Then why don't you trust us? You can't pretend you don't know we're capable of more than you think. There it was. The challenge was out in the open now. Kyra's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, Evan thought she might snap, might use her Thrillian abilities to push him back or shut him down. But instead, she took a deep breath and seemed to compose herself. You have no idea what you're dealing with, she said, her voice colder than ever. Humanity's unpredictability is dangerous. You do not know the damage you can cause. Evan stood up straight, his posture unwavering. If we're so dangerous, then why haven't we attacked? Why haven't we tried to take over? Why are we sitting here, talking, instead of fighting? Kyra didn't answer immediately. Instead, she turned away from him, walking to the large window at the far side of the room, looking out into the vast expanse of space. Evan could see the tension in her back, the way her shoulders were tight with something. Was it fear, regret, or just anger? He couldn't tell. I don't trust your kind, she said after a long pause, her voice low. I don't trust that you won't destroy everything you touch. Evan's jaw tightened. He could feel the weight of her words, but he refused to let them break him. He wasn't going to let Kyra define humanity with her prejudice. Not this time. Maybe you're right, he said, his voice soft but firm. Maybe we have the potential to destroy, but we also have the potential to build, to create, and to connect. You've seen what we've done with the colonies, the science, the technology. We don't give up, ever. Kyra turned back to face him, her golden eyes locking onto his. I don't care about your colonies, your technology, or your science. I care about whether or not your species can be trusted with the future. And you think the Thrillians are the only ones who can be trusted? Evan asked, stepping closer. I don't think that's true. You're afraid of us because you don't know us. You think we're reckless. But that's only because we refuse to be controlled. Kyra's expression darkened, and for the first time, Evan saw the hint of a real emotion. A deep, burning frustration that came to the surface. You humans are all the same. You think you can change everything, just by throwing yourselves at it. But you don't understand what it means to be in control. To be above all of that. Chaos. Evan's eyes softened. He knew there was something deeper behind Kyra's words. Something personal that she wasn't sharing. But this wasn't the time to press her. Instead, he took a step back, giving her space. I don't need control, Kyra, he said quietly. I just need to know that when we meet someone, we can build something together. I know that's hard to believe when you're used to ruling everything with power. But if we're going to survive out here in the galaxy, we have to trust each other. R.A.T.R. Kiara didn't say anything for a long time. She simply stood there, looking at him with a mixture of disdain and something more, something he couldn't quite place. Finally, she spoke, her voice cold and sharp. Trust is a luxury, Commander, one I cannot afford. Evan felt the sting of her words, but he refused to let it show. He wasn't going to back down now. Then, you'll never understand what it means to be human, to be capable of greatness, even when we're at our worst. The room fell silent, and Kiara's gaze hardened once more. She turned away, her back to him. We will continue our discussions, Commander. But remember, there is only so much patience a species can afford. Evan knew that this meeting had shifted things. The walls between him and Kiara had gotten thicker, and the path to trust seemed further away than ever. But he wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. He turned toward the door, but before he left, he glanced back at Kiara. We'll prove you wrong. One day, you'll see that we can be trusted. And with that, he walked out of the room, knowing the battle for peace was far from over. The days following the last meeting between Commander Evan Trevors and Ambassador Kiara were filled with uncertainty. Diplomatic talks had stalled, and the tension between humanity and the Thrillians was palpable. Every interaction felt like a battle, each side standing firm in their beliefs, unwilling to bend. Yet, deep down, Evan could sense something had shifted in Kiara, though she wouldn't admit it. Evan knew they couldn't stay on this course forever. An alliance was still possible, but only if both sides could find common ground. For the first time in his life, Evan felt the weight of the responsibility on his shoulders. He wasn't just trying to secure peace for his people. He was trying to prove that humanity had more to offer than the Thrillians gave them credit for. The situation came to a head during a scheduled summit. This was it. This meeting would determine the future of human-Thrillian relations. If they couldn't agree now, war might be the only option left. Evan arrived at the research station once again, his mind focused and determined. He had a plan. He was going to make this meeting different. No more formalities, no more polite exchanges. He was going to speak from the heart, no matter what. The conference room was much like it had been the last time, sparse, with walls that shimmered in shifting hues. But this time, the atmosphere felt heavier, thicker. The stakes had never been higher. Kiara stood at the far side of the room, her glowing figure radiating quiet authority. Her golden eyes met his as he entered. But this time, there was something different in her gaze. It wasn't just coldness anymore. There was something else. Something faintly human. Commander, Kiara greeted, her voice steady, though there was a trace of something else beneath her calm exterior. Evan, he said, his tone firm but not unkind. Let's talk. Kiara didn't immediately respond, instead choosing to stand still for a moment, considering him. Evan could see the internal struggle on her face, the Thrillian pride battling with something else, something more vulnerable that she kept locked away. You've come to talk again, Kiara said finally. But there's little left to discuss, don't you think? Evan took a breath. He wasn't about to back down now. I think we've only just begun, Kiara. And I'm not going to give up until you understand one thing about humanity. Kiara's eyes flickered. And what is that? Evan stepped closer, keeping his voice calm but full of conviction. We're not perfect. We make mistakes. We fail. But we always keep going. We don't give up, no matter how hard things get. That's what makes us different from the other species out here. We rise, even when everything seems impossible. Kiara's gaze hardened. But she didn't interrupt. She was listening. For the first time, she was listening. You don't understand, she said after a long pause. Your species is reckless. You take risks without thinking. You push forward blindly. Maybe, Evan said, shaking his head. But you know what? It's the only way we've survived. We might stumble. We might fall. But we always get back up. Every single time. We're not afraid of failure, Kara. We embrace it, because it's what makes us better. Kara's expression softened for a fraction of a second, and Evan saw something in her eyes that he hadn't seen before: doubt. Just the smallest glimmer of doubt. You think that's enough? She asked quietly. You think that just trying, just pushing forward, is enough to make peace with my people? Evan took another step forward. No, I don't think it's enough. But it's a start. It's something. If we didn't keep going, we wouldn't be standing here today. And I believe it's worth trying again. For both of us. Kara's face was unreadable again. She turned away from him, looking out the window at the vast expanse of space beyond. Evan could tell that she was struggling with something, perhaps the same thing that had driven her to be so guarded, so distant. I've seen your kind fight among yourselves, Kara said quietly. The wars, the destruction. You humans are capable of such terrible things. You could destroy everything you touch. Evan's heart tightened, but he didn't flinch. You're right, he said. We've done terrible things. But we've also done incredible things. We've created, we've built, we've learned from our mistakes, and we've tried to be better. And that's what matters. Not how many times we've fallen, but how many times we've stood back up. Kara turned to face him, her golden eyes meeting his with something new in them. A mixture of curiosity and wariness. And you think that's enough to change the future? To change what's already been decided? Evan smiled, a small but confident smile. I think it's the only thing that can change the future. The room fell into silence. And for the first time, Evan felt like they were both on the same page. He wasn't trying to convince her with grand speeches or promises. He was just telling her the truth. The same truth that had gotten humanity to this point, the truth that they never gave up. Kara's gaze softened, and she took a slow breath, as though weighing her next words carefully. You, humans, are stubborn, she said, almost fondly. You don't understand the consequences of your actions. But you never stop trying to make things right, even when everything around you is falling apart. Evan nodded. It's who we are. Kara was quiet for a long moment. She turned back to the window, her figure almost blending in with the stars. I've seen your potential, Commander. Perhaps more than I wanted to. Evan stepped closer again, lowering his voice. And what do you see? I see the future, she said softly. I see what humanity can become. If you truly learn from your past, if you can control your impulses, maybe you can be the allies we need. The words hung in the air between them, and Evan's heart raced. For the first time, Kara wasn't just tolerating humanity, she was starting to believe in them. The walls she had built around herself were cracking. Just enough for the light to shine through. Then let's make it happen, Evan said. Let's create a future where both our species can stand side by side. Let's stop focusing on what divides us and start focusing on what we can build together. Kara turned back to face him, her expression still thoughtful. Then, after a long pause, she nodded. Perhaps there is something to your words, Commander. Perhaps there is more to humanity than I've allowed myself to see. Evan's smile widened. Then we have a deal? For the first time, Kara's lips curved into a small smile, though it was fleeting. We have a deal. And just like that, the impossible happened. Humanity and the Thrillians were no longer enemies. They weren't allies yet. Not fully. But they were on the path to becoming something more. The trust wasn't there yet. But it would come. It would take time, But humanity had already proven that it was willing to fight for it. Evan knew that the journey ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be more challenges, more doubts, more setbacks. But for the first time, in a long time, he felt hope. Not just for humanity, but for the galaxy as a whole. Because sometimes, all it took was one moment, one person to change everything. As he left the conference room, his thoughts raced ahead, imagining a future where humans and Thrillians worked together, not just for peace, but for something even greater. He didn't know what that future would look like, but one thing was certain: humanity was ready for it. And so, with a heart full of determination, Evan walked toward the unknown, knowing that humanity's greatest triumph was yet to come.